1 is going to cover pages 5 through 7. So question number 4 up at the top of the page 5 talks about Kiko again. Kiko is working with a new function g of x. She writes down the following steps for her g of x. She wants to add 5, divide by 2, cube it, and then multiply by 6, okay? So we're going to take this x, and we're going to do these 4 operations to it. All right, so for part A, it says, what is the equation for g of x, and what is the output when 3 is the input? Okay, so first let's start with writing the equation for g of x. Cover the answer real quick. All right, so we're going to start with our x. That could be any number we're going to plug in there. We're going to plug in 3 in a second. But the first step we want to do is we want to add 5. Okay, so we're going to say x plus 5. Then we want to divide that by 2. So I put it in a fraction, put a 2 in the denominator. Or you could put the x plus 5 in parentheses and put a division symbol after it if you wanted to. Then we're going to take that and we're going to cube it. Cube it means to the 3rd power. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 6. Okay? Everybody good so far? Okay. Now we're going to take the 3 and we're going to plug it in here where that x is at. Okay? So we're going to find our g of 3. So where the x was at, I plugged in a 3. And now we're going to follow order of operations. So order of operations says we need to do parentheses first. Then we need to do the exponent. Then we need to do multiplication and division. And then addition and subtraction. Okay? So within the parentheses, we're going to add in the numerator first, which should get us 8. Then within the parentheses, we're going to divide the 8 divided by 2, which should get us 4. Then the next order of operation is to cube it, so the exponent or the power. 4 to the 3rd power is 64. And then the last operation is to multiply by 6, and we should get 384. Right? You guys have all done this before, right? We're good? Following order of operations? PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay. For the next part, oh, my throat. Part B, it says, help Kiko write down the steps in words for the inverse machine, g inverse of x, and then write its equation. First, we're going to write the steps. So remember up here, we're going to do what with these steps? There's 2 things we have to do with it. Yes? Do them in reverse order. She's going like this with her fingers. She's flipping her fingers back and forth. So do them in reverse order. So start at the bottom and go to the top. And then what else? What did we do yesterday? Do the opposite operation. Okay? So if the last step was to multiply by 6, we're going to divide by 6. So right, divide by 6 for the first step. Then, if we're going backwards, it says to cube it. What is the inverse operation of cubing? Cube root. So we're going to find the cube root second. The next step up would have been divide by 2. So what's the inverse operation? Multiply by 2. And then the last one says add 5. So we're going to subtract 5. Okay? Then we're going to write it out mathematically, right? We're going to start with our x. So that's generic for any value that we're going to plug in. Start with our x, divide it by 6. So x over 6, or you can use the division sign if you prefer. Then we're going to cube root it. So I put the cube root around it. Then we're going to multiply by 2. So I put 2 dot out front. And then the last thing was subtract 5. So we're going to write minus 5 at the end. Okay? Order of operations says I have to do the multiplying before I subtract. So if you want, you can put this in another set of parentheses, but you don't have to because order of operations is going to make you do that. Okay? All right, so now what's it going to have us do? Part C says, verify that your equation in part B correctly undoes the output of g of x in part A. All right, so in part A up here, we got an answer of 384. So we're going to plug in 384 into our inverse g of x. Okay? And we should get what? 3. Okay? So let's see if it's going to happen. So I plugged the 384 in there where the x was at. Order of operations says I need to do the innermost in that parentheses first. So we're going to do 384 divided by 6, which is 64. Then we're going to take the cube root of 64, which happens to be 4. Then we have to multiply that 4 by 2, which is 8. And then the 8 minus 5 is 3. So we just verified that our inverse was correct. The first time, we plugged in 3 and got 84. The second time, we plugged in 384 and we got 3. So everybody see how that's working? All right, awesome. Flip over to the top of page 6. At the top of page 6, in your groups of 4, you are going to do problem 5-5. It says, what are the inverse functions for each of the functions below? Use your function notation. Justify that each equation for the inverse works. So I'm going to have you guys do A, B, and D. We're going to do C, as in cat, together. So our equation for C was P of x, which is equal to 2 times the quantity x plus 3, and then that's cubed. Okay? So the inverse notation would be P inverse of x. And we're going to do the steps backwards. Okay? So if the we're going to take the x and we're going to divide it by 2 instead of multiplying by 2. And then the inverse operation of cubing, we just saw on the prior page, is cube rooting. And then the adding 3, the inverse operation is to subtract 3. Okay? Now we're going to justify it. So we're going to pick a number to plug into the original equation. Now, I picked -3 because I wanted this number in here to be 0, because I like to work with 0 a lot. So I found P of -3. So -3 plus 3 is 0, which makes it super easy to work with. 0 cubed is 0, and 2 times 0 is 0. But you can pick whatever number you want to plug into your other 3 different functions, okay? Now we should be able to plug 0 into the inverse function, and we should get out -3, right? Okay, so let's plug in 0. So 0 over 2 is 0. The cube root of 0 is 0. And 0 minus 3 is -3. Okay? So you're going to take, well, let me shrink it just a tad here. Where is it? You're going to take the function that they give you. If you want to write down the steps and then write them backwards, you can, if you want. Then write the inverse function in math notation. Then pick a number to plug in. It doesn't have to be -3 every time. Pick something that makes sense for each different equation. Show it going each direction. Okay? Then you're going to turn over to page 7 after you do A, B, and D. And here's what it wants you to do at the top of page 7. At the top of page 7, it says choose one function and its inverse from the previous problem. So on the previous page, there were 4 of them, right? Each team member in your group is going to choose a different function. Then you're going to make a complete graph and a table for your function and its inverse. Okay? Circle and the function and its inverse. Graph the function and its inverse on the same set of axes. So you're going to graph your function, then you're going to graph your inverse function on the same graph. You can do that with Desmos, okay? When each person in your team has finished, put everyone's work in the middle. So you're going to put them all in the middle, and you're going to look at them. Something should pop out to you. There should be something that all of them have, okay? Describe what relationships you see between the representations of a function and its inverse, okay? You should have something happening with all of them. If you don't, call me over and we'll check them. But you should have, at that point, have verified that it worked, right? All right. Go ahead and turn back over to page 6. Turn into your groups. You're going to do A, B, and D together. And then you're going to graph it and see what happens. It's pretty cool.